I'm Ira Joy, and welcome to On Courage, a podcast that explores a fundamental virtue for each one of us, no matter our backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives. After a career setback, I wrestled deeply with self-doubt and fear, eventually realizing that in order to rebuild my confidence, I had to start by rediscovering my courage. I've been reading books and listening to experts, but I figured I needed to be surrounding myself with courageous people too. And that's why I'm here with you as you listen today, hopefully on board my mission to learn from creative people who have harnessed the power of courage to find success in their careers and fulfillment in their lives. This is a podcast on courage for all those who, like me, long to grow a little more courageous each and every day. Today I chat to the very insightful and articulate Jon Hoevenaars, a sports media presenter and producer who is currently creating a wide range of content for Tennis Australia. Other than that, he's a storyteller and a musician, and a man with a great passion and curiosity for people, and a wonderful life that's inspired by his Christian faith. This is a very enlightening and encouraging conversation where we wrestle with topics such as identity, success, fear, and surrender. Jon's perspective on courage is so thought-provoking that it's bound to make this episode worth a re-listen. Enjoy. Hi, Jon. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Ira. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you on. And before we deep dive into all things Jon Hoevenaars, I'd love you to just give us a brief snapshot about who you are.
So I'm a Sydney-born, Geelong-raised and now Melbourne resident, and I work in the media communications sphere, specifically in sports media, currently with Tennis Australia, but also with AFL and SEN radio over the years. I really like sport, although I wouldn't say I'm dyed-in-the-wool sports fanatic, because for me it's just one segment of many interests. To me, I'm more interested in the aspects of storytelling and reportage that give me an opportunity to explore and express ways of communicating and ways of using words and images to tell a message or to be compelling or to change someone's mind. And so sports media is just one playground for me, but there are many others. And I'm really interested in people and how they think, how they come to their conclusions, and how I might be more compelling in influencing people.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So much interesting ideas just in that introduction, which I'm sure we'll explore throughout our chat. But I might rewind the clock a little bit and take you back to your childhood days. If you could cast your mind back to perhaps 5-6-year-old Jon, if you can recall kind of what things you were interested in back then and anything that might have given a clue towards the path that you're on now.
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I'm sure there are. And the one that comes to mind is the fact that my dad rented a video camera the day I was born and has, from my earliest age, recorded a lot of moments throughout my life. And so I was no stranger to having a camera in my face from my earliest memory. And yeah, I mean, I literally mean the day I was born because I've got video footage to prove it. And then he actually purchased a camera probably when I was, I'm guessing, 2 or 3. And so I was experimenting on both sides of the Panasonic, so to speak, from a very early age, and became very interested in, curious about, and adept at delivering messages to camera, and then using the post-production skills and the edit suite to manipulate a message. And I use manipulate in the most careful sense, not in the nefarious sense.
Of course, yeah. And you would be kind of straddling the analog digital line, because I'd assume we're around the same age. So, starting off with were you on Betamax or VHS,
Yep.
mini DV?
Well, I mean, when my dad first got it, who knows? It could have been Betamax for all I know. But by the time I picked up a camera, it was definitely, I think, the yeah, VHS and then into mini DV sort of around the early noughties.
Yes.
And yeah, had great fun in the digital space, given how easy it was to hook it up to the computer and work some magic. So yeah, digital video production was something more of a hobby for me. My true love was my true passion was probably in broadcasting, like the live space, and it was a field that I eventually found my way into in radio, and it was great fun because there's nowhere to hide when you're live. And there's a different kind of pressure that's way more performative and way more akin to the performing arts space, which was another hobby of mine throughout high school and
Right.
beyond. So, although now I don't work in the live space, I still employ some of its principles in the way I go about podcasting and video production in a non-live setting.
Great. So it seems like you were really clear on what you were interested in doing, and I suppose just following those passions as you were getting older. What other influences might there have been that shaped your desire to pursue media and actually eventually go on to study it?
Yeah, so beyond our little at-home backyard cricket association that we sort of invented and grew among schoolmates in year 9, um, it was a year 10 teacher of mine, a PE teacher, but also became a health teacher of mine, who was a part-time broadcaster. His name was Wes Cusworth. He worked for the ABC, and he recognised in me I guess, a natural penchant for the airwaves, and decided to invite me down to the local Geelong Footy League to do some, and Bellarine Footy League down in the Bellarine Peninsula, to do some football broadcasting on the radio, on local radio on the weekends. And so at age 15, that really sparked a desire in me to pursue a professional career in sports broadcasting if I could work out how to do that. Although at that stage, the pathway wasn't exactly clear because the industry was undergoing a lot of changes. But I worked my way into a university course where I actually met you, Ira, at RMIT, and found a way to study the craft as well as continuing the volunteering at a community level in Melbourne and Geelong.
Yes. And did you enjoy your uni years?
I did. It was, to be honest, the workload was very manageable in the applied communication space. I'm not sure if that's true of all courses in the field, but certainly at RMIT, there were so few contact hours that it gave us heaps of opportunity to be plying our trades and sort of perfecting our craft off, away from the lecture theatre and on the court, so to speak. For me, on the boundaries of the footy field and eventually the sidelines of the tennis court. And so yeah, it was great fun, uni, and also the networking opportunities to meet a lot of people either working in the industry or who had worked in the industry, many of whom are now colleagues and counterparts, so to speak. Contemporaries is probably a better word,
Contemporaries,
of
yes.
mine.
Yes, and is so crucial in this kind of industry as well. Networking and who you know is really how you open yourself to opportunities. So during that time, you mentioned it before, just the uncertainty with regards to the pathway out of study into the actual professional industry. Did you have a plan of attack of what you were going to do once you graduated? Talk me through your feelings on the precipice of graduation and how you wanted to approach your future.
Yeah, at the end of the third year of uni, I still didn't have a specific clear direction in terms of, well, what am I going to do next year? So I took like you did, I took the opportunity to add the fourth year, the honours year. For me, not necessarily to improve my academic record or, plaudits or, anything that was on paper. It was more just to buy me an extra year of being in Melbourne, being in metropolitan Melbourne, and also, I had started working casually at SEN Radio as a panel operator, a glorified button pusher of all things, just in the evenings in my third year. And because I just landed that job at the end of my third year, I thought, well, I may as well take up an honours year so I can keep that foot in the door and maybe try and wedge it in a little bit further in a bid to become, in a bid to join the newsroom or something in an on-air capacity rather than just production. And I managed to do that. And such was my fortune, or such were the plans that were laid out for me, that by about, I think, September or October of that fourth year of uni, I was getting my first taste of on-air experience at SEN on the overnight shift, the graveyard between midnight and 6 a.m. Not as the host, but as a guest contributor, and just getting a feel for what talkback radio was like in the wee hours of the morning.
And you did such a smart thing to try to open up yourself to opportunities while you're still studying. I think that's something I also really vouch for, whether it's volunteering or, taking unpaid internships. It's just so instrumental in helping you to apply those skills that you're learning throughout education. But on that, I want to pick your brain around how you put yourself out there for opportunities, because that doesn't always come naturally to people. It's a very scary thing to be young and ambitious, but not really having any that inner confidence. So I'm curious as to what it was you seemed to be able to channel at that time to put yourself out there and land some cool gigs.
I got to qualify all of this by saying I've just been extremely fortunate. Some would call it luck, in terms of being given opportunities. So in this industry, a lot of people have to really hustle and sometimes hassle employers to get gigs. And many times in journalism, in broadcasting, that requires some really sacrificial moves. A lot of the time, it might mean a move to the country, to a regional centre, to a place that's very unfamiliar, and doing the hard work, the unappealing jobs that no one really wants to do, but you got to start somewhere. I guess that's been the way of the industry for time in memoriam, that you start by getting the coffees for the execs, and maybe you become a paper boy, and maybe you get a job in the archive, or whatever it might be. But for me, I think that I was very fortunate to be able to stay in Melbourne the entire time, from when I first moved here to study all the way through to now, which is, what is it, like 19, I think 19 years. And I haven't left this city. So to land a job at SEN, a major metropolitan commercial broadcasting outlet, so to speak, was very rare. Now, did I get it through raw talent? No, because actually the initial recommendation for that panel op position came through a contact at uni, of all places. So for me, it's always been a case of responding yes to whatever door happens to open before me. Sometimes that's daunting anyway, because as we might discover throughout this podcast, imposter syndrome is a real thing. And the fear that I might not be the right person for this job, or I might not be qualified, or I might be exposed, is real. And I felt that too. But I also had enough people, not everyone, but I had enough people who were encouraging me, who were affirming my ability, and who gave me enough confidence to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And even if I wasn't, ready made for the position, at least I had the framework, the, rudimentary framework, to be able to build out the required skill set for that role. And so I guess I've been encouraged from those type of early moments to now be able to seek even more challenging opportunities, ones that I might even feel more exposed in later in my career. And so it's a lesson that is learned over time, but then the courage that comes from that, I think, is self-perpetuating, because you can really feed off the lessons you learned and the opportunities you had early on to foster a career deep into your, deep throughout your life.
Would you say that you're a hard worker?
I can be a hard worker. Yeah, I can. If I'm really passionate about something, and if I feel like I have the skill set for this and I know all the pieces, then yeah, give me the task and I'll take it on. I'm really hardworking. Where I fail to be a hard worker is when doubt encroaches into my mind, and where I feel like maybe actually I will fail in this task. It's a combination of procrastination and laziness, I guess. but generally I know when I've found my call because I'm really buzzing to get going, and I can work hard for a long period of time.
There are a few things there because, firstly, I've been told that hard work helps generate luck. So that's how I would, being, an external person to your story, I think that would, be very, very viable that those opportunities came out of you working hard in the sense of, putting yourself out there, doing well at your studies, networking and hustling, so to speak, and hustling in
Yes.
some ways. So that's one thing. But then you mentioned here about doubt and how that's obviously a stumbling block and imposter syndrome. So I'd love to flesh that out a bit more because I think, we're in a culture that does fixate on success a lot and always looks at the tangible outcomes to things, but we don't really explore the process. So when you say that you don't work hard or you're discouraged from working hard and it stems from self-doubt and causes you to procrastinate, what is that like? Like what goes through your mind and how do you, I guess, talk yourself down, or who do you lean on and where do you go for support?
Yeah, they're big questions, and they're probably things that everyone knows what it feels like, but perhaps doesn't take the time to reflect upon and work out what's exactly going on, like at a psychological level or at a spiritual level. I mean, doubt for me, doubt is evil. Doubt is antithetical to a good life. Doubt is antithetical to a prosperous life, and doubt is something that needs to be dealt with and overcome. Now, it can never be. I don't believe this side of eternity, this side of heaven, we can truly put doubt to death. But I think what we can do is learn ways to combat it. And to combat doubt, you need hope. And where does hope come from? Hope comes from a strong sense of identity, a strong sense of who you are. And there are so many traps to stumbling blocks that are getting in the way of understanding who we are. And one of the greatest stumbling blocks, I believe, in the West is the trap of self-worth. That is, that we are only as valuable as the sum of our output. We are only as valuable as how well we can achieve or how far we can go, how much we can earn in our caper, in our chosen field. And to fall short, to fail, to have moments where we actually don't cut it, or where we are criticized, or perhaps where we even lose a job, or have to change tack in our career. These are all things that can really destabilize someone who doesn't have a strong identity. So for me, it was a gradual but very discernible understanding that I've come to, that my identity and therefore my self-worth is not in what I do for a living, and what I have achieved, what my LinkedIn biography says I am, or what my CV impresses upon a prospective employer. But that I am, for me as a Christian, my self-worth is squarely and firmly in being a creation of the one true God, the God who is described and revealed in the Bible. And therefore, my worth is really girded in the knowledge and the compulsion, if you will, the confidence that even if I fail, I will still be able to fall back on my unmistakable and untakeable love in the eyes of my Creator. So this is a rather abstract concept for a lot of people, and potentially some of your listeners, some of your viewers. But for me, it's foundational to who I am, and allows me to take courage in moments where I feel like I should give up, stop working, throw in the towel, or turn and walk the other way. And you can apply it to not just work and career. You can apply that to relationships as well. What am I supposed to do with my time? Where am I supposed to be living? How am I supposed to be spending my money? Questions of that nature. So yeah, I'm a big believer in identity comes before destiny. which is not my quote. I'm actually borrowing there from a guy called Ken Costa, who is an investment banker. And he says, naturally, we try and skip over identity to get to destiny because we're so obsessed with it. But realistically, we need to acknowledge that our identity comes before our destiny.
Yes, wow. Oh goodness, that's a lot to unpack there, but something that's just I think will be very thought provoking for people. And we've had a chat behind the scenes around how you view courage as a kind of surrender, relinquishing control over what your destiny is, but you're recognizing that who you are lies in something, and the ultimate creator has already defined who we are, and we don't necessarily need to keep looking in the world for those things. And I think there's a lot to be explored there in terms of how identity plays out in current culture.
Yep.
I'd love to hear your personal experiences as a young man growing up, especially in this kind of industry that is cutthroat and competitive, dog eat dog kind of world. Like, how did you navigate your identity through that? Or has your Christian faith always been something that has stabilized you?
Well, it's a little of column A and little of column B. Short answer is yes, my faith has always been there throughout, but it hasn't been as strong all the way through. And the revelations that I shared just a little bit earlier have come over time. These are not things that are necessarily self-evident. And I don't think just on the topic of self-evidence, I don't think courage is self-evident either, nor do I think anyone is naturally born courageous. And we can talk about definition of courage later as well. But I think courage itself comes from knowledge and understanding of identity. So for me, in answer to your question, the way I navigated these moments of doubt were over a lot of time and seeking counsel, because there were times in my life and career where I had actually fallen into those pitfalls that I mentioned before, those traps of thinking that the sum of my identity was in what I could achieve in my job, and particularly in the media industry where it's all on the line because it's public facing. There are just so many things that can go wrong. And so I look back on my time as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old sports reporter. So two things can really go wrong. One is you get exposed in front of your colleagues. So it might be at a press conference, and I think of one where a particularly revered AFL coach tore me apart in a press conference in front of, say, 20 people in the room, and however many thousand that came across that clip as well, simply for asking what was a naive question, but a question that he really didn't take kindly to. It was quite a probing question as it turned out, but he was very defensive, and instead of answering it, he took it out on an easy target. Made me feel incredibly small, made me feel like I shouldn't be there, like I didn't deserve to be in the room, like I wasn't valid, that I wasn't welcome. And so that's one thing. And another thing is when you're exposed in front of the public. So you might invariably in live broadcasting, you will make an error. That might be a factual error. That might be a tiny little factual error that maybe most people just don't even realize and you get away with. But sometimes you make an error that's so glaring or so obvious that the majority of the listeners will know and will remember that and will keep you accountable to that. So if you make a particular kind of error on radio or on TV, you may be forever branded as the person who said this or the person who believes this. And so, I'm not going to share a specific example because fortunately for me, I didn't really have to deal with that. Like the only errors I made were glancing ones, like, small details that you tend to get away with or not such a big deal. But plenty of other reporters, presenters have made errors that have really compromised their career to the point where they might have to step away for a year, especially if it's a quote unquote cancelable offense, or in some extreme instances, actually just leave the industry, go into hiding and never to return, which is a great shame because there's a lot of talented people who get scared off And it's mostly because they can't face up to the fact that making errors is a part of life, and they feel as if they have to go into hiding in order to survive. And I think, so looping back to my point about identity, being encouraged about who we are and where our value is helps us to persist in these trials, these challenges. And even though there is a cost to courage, which we can talk about, and I believe true courage comes in the form of complete surrender to something, or to a greater cause, to a greater power, it certainly requires the ability to hold loosely to the things that we think we have to hold tightly to in order to healthily move beyond them.
So 22-year-old Jon, who was humiliated by that AFL coach, who was made to feel small in that moment, what was the next step for you, especially when you're on the verge of building a career in broadcasting? How did you find, I guess, that resilience to keep going in that moment?
Well, first of all, I had some wonderful colleagues from other networks that were present in the room, who immediately got around me I'm talking immediately after the press conference, got around me and said, "Don't worry about him. He's like that to all of us. We've all been through it," which was alarming, but extremely encouraging, because I didn't feel alone. Second of all, I had the opportunity to debrief on the moment with my colleagues back at the station, and they'd heard about it because it had already been reported in whatever form, because it was a bit of a viral moment. Some of the news outlets ran it immediately, and it was actually front page of the newspaper the next morning. But the coverage of it was not disfavorable to me. It was disfavorable to the coach. So I actually did feel as if I had the support and solidarity of the working media, which was really nice. I didn't feel as if they'd all turned on me. Also, I had family and friends who I was able to confide in. And I think absolutely one of the necessary components of being able to survive in a public-facing career is to have good people around you who can encourage. I emphasize that word specifically on the subject for this podcast, because I think to try and take it on alone is an uphill battle. I actually think it's one that's almost unfightable to do it alone. And then third of all was to actually sit down, analyze exactly what had happened, and to make sense of it from a different perspective. So, okay, sure, I asked a question and got savaged, and it was recorded on video for the world to see. But really, if you actually dig deeper into that, what's happened? Okay, a young reporter has asked a reasonable question. Maybe it was worded in a little bit naively, or in a way that was that could have been worded better, maybe, to elicit a more constructive response. But at the end of the day, a lot of people said, well, it was a valid angle. You just, probably could have phrased it differently. And he's not the first person to respond defensively in that environment. As we all know, press conferences are pressure cooker environments. There's no time to prepare what you say, and everything that does get said is recorded. And so that's just the nature of the beast. Looking back on it over the following weeks and months, and now years, I sort of don't think it doesn't make me cringe. Now, I've had other instances where I have had regrets that I do cringe at. You'll be in the shower one day or lying in bed, and you'll think of something that happened 5-10 years ago, and you're like, geez, what was it about me that made me say it that way? Or how could I have said it better? Or I wish I'd said it this way. And, regret, remorse, these are very real emotional things that we all experience from time to time. And there are, again, good ways and bad ways to deal with that. And to face regret, to face it front on, and to embrace it and own it, and to say, how can I learn from this, or how can I do it better, is a really courageous decision. But you got to have someone to encourage you. And that's why I say encouragement must come before courage, because I just don't think it's possible to be courageous autonomously. I honestly believe that courage is the result of being encouraged, and this can take a great variety of forms for different people at different times.
Well, thank you for also recognizing the double entendre of the name of the show, because that's why I did call it On Courage, and with the, hidden brackets EN courage
Yep.
in that as well, because I am also a big believer in, that sort of collective community to help encourage one another. It makes you realize that courage isn't just an isolating thing, or that we're expected to, generate it all on our own, that it does come with having the right people around you to love and
Yep.
support you. So I really love that you've highlighted that. You mentioned too this idea of being vulnerable in a sense, being courageous enough to know that you are flawed and that you make mistakes. I'd love you to kind of share more experiences around, as you were building your career, wrestling with your own doubts and experiences like the one you just mentioned, how through being vulnerable or through seeking other people to help, that actually helped you find success eventually.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily see it as finding success eventually. I think it's not as linear as that. And by no means have I discovered the silver bullet solution. What I do have is the foundational tools to be able to work through any challenges or moments of doubt or fear that arise. But it doesn't make me a perfect, proponent, or uh, doesn't make me a perfect example of how to be courageous. I have been blessed with two wonderful parents who also share my values, who share my beliefs, and who have helped shape my understanding of them. By no means have they been enforced upon me, but they've been gently guided along the way. They Both my parents were high achievers in their studies and careers, and so it's one of the temptations is to think that we must keep that up, that we must make our parents proud and validate them, I guess, as parents by achieving similar things. Incidentally, both my parents are in the health science field, so it's probably worth noting that I chose a field, I chose a trajectory of career that was almost 180 degrees the opposite of what they do. But they have still been able to encourage me along the way by reminding me of who I am and reminding me that my worth is not in what I do or what I achieve. However, still celebrating the wins along the way, and also in those moments of failure. And I might just share another one around the same time, sort of early to mid 20s, after I'd had a few really great opportunities, and I'm talking about, opportunities that don't usually come to young reporters at that stage of their career. And I felt like I was climbing quickly. I felt like the trajectory of my career was quite steep. And I was, wow, like I'm really making big steps along the way. Imagine what I could be, imagine where I could be in the next 5 years. And I probably got stuck in expecting that more would come. Anyway, very quickly I hit a plateau in my career, and the opportunities dried up, and I felt like I was going backwards, but really I was just sort of doing the same thing over and over. And I noticed that people younger than me, or people who'd come along after me in the industry, were starting to quote unquote overtake me in opportunities, accolades. They would break stories and they would win awards that I felt like I could have done that. Like, what? Why aren't I in these situations? And I started to get really cynical about it. Like, oh, this is not fair. This is terrible. Really, it's nothing to do with fairness, and that there is a combination of factors at play there. But I started to take it personally, and I needed people like my parents and good friends who just loved me as a person, not as a sports reporter, not even as someone who was, like trying to cut it in the industry, but just as a friend, a son, brother, whatever it might be. People to take me aside and to mentor me and to give me that reminder that we love you anyway. And, everyone goes through these moments, and they're going to shape you, of course, but they're not going to define you. So don't see these setbacks as something that needs to stop you or discourage you. Be encouraged to keep persisting and pursuing your chosen field, whatever that might be, in the face of adversity. So I was really appreciative of that. And I think such is the nature of encouragement, it perpetuates. And so the person who has been encouraged can encourage someone else in the same way as they learn the lesson themselves.
And, the comparison trap is very real and very hard to avoid sometimes, especially when you're just sort of carving out a pathway or a future for yourself. I think it links as well, with the theme of courage, because it's really about, as you said, our identity and what
Yep.
we are defining ourselves with. So how do you, Jon, view success?
I think there's no greater display of what the Western world at least, of how the Western world views success than LinkedIn, particularly over the last few years, because we probably get the unadulterated version of what people perceive success to be in the way that they talk about themselves or promote themselves. And so I don't need to tell any of our listeners. You can just jump on LinkedIn and read what people are writing about themselves. But they are the things that define success at least in the corporate world. Maybe there are other ways in different sectors of life and industry. So for me, I actively try and resist this, and I'm a unashamed anti-conformist or non-conformist. And I like to not just resist these things, which is hard enough to do, but also almost take a stand against them and do it in a clever, gentle, do it in a clever, creative way rather than just tearing shreds off people, but kind of to challenge the status quo, to challenge what real success is. Because I think eventually, even if I don't say it or if no one says it, people will work it out themselves, because they're going to get to an age where, like I found in my early career, success dries up and you're not going to feel great about it if you've put all your eggs into that particular basket. So for me, success is not in the things that we can quickly achieve or accumulate or build up or write down on a profile. For me, actually, a successful life looks like one that is continually emptying self. So removing the layers that I could use to build up an image of myself to make me look impressive, and actually giving those things away, whether it be power, prestige, privilege, plans, and they all happen to be P words, but you can add a few more. Giving up the things that actually would be costly, because they're not easy to give up those things. They do require a surrender. But what we're left with, I believe, once we've peeled off these, once we've peeled off the mirage, the masks of a successful exterior, is humility, selflessness, and a belief in something greater than self, whether that be a conviction, a cause, an end game that points outwards, that doesn't point to the self and draws the spotlight to the self, but chooses to put the spotlight on something that is greater. And you might know, for you, I'm sure, like me, that spotlight is to turn the spotlight onto the one who created us all, to the one who created this world, to the one who sets the planets in their orbit and sets the stars in place, and to basically glorify the one who is not me. And that requires cost. There is a cost to that, and there is a surrender to that. But I think that a successful life is one that empties the self and makes more of the one who is greater, and makes more of others, to prefer others' needs as well.
Yes,
which is hard to do.
service, yes. Well, what you're saying, it's in direct opposition to what current culture tells us. It's self-love, it's self-care, your own desires in a way, which in a different light is not inherently bad, in the sense of, you do need to look after your body and your mind and spiritual nourishment and all that kind of thing. But how does one who perhaps doesn't share our beliefs, what would you say to them, and what would you encourage them to perhaps think about?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, because I'm sure there are aspects of what I've just talked about that are common to other ideologies. I'm approaching this from a Christian worldview, And so everything I've said is grounded in an understanding or conviction that the God of the Bible is in charge of everything and that he created me and therefore he owns me and therefore my identity is in him. And therefore the action of emptying self is not one of self-sabotage, as you rightly want to clarify, but is actually one of temporary suffering, if you will, want to call it that, for future glory. And so this is a short-term suffering for glory later. And that is a principle of Christianity that I'm sure carries across other faith traditions and definitely across. You just have to look at people who go to the gym and you can see that principle at play there, or someone who chooses clean eating or detoxing.
Yes.
I'm not saying that all of these things then are the same or of equal importance. I'm just saying that the principles that I talk about in choosing to suffer now for glory later or for success later
Or
are
gym junkies would say, no pain, no gain.
exactly
Yes.
same thing. You gotta put in the blood, sweat, and tears to get places. However, I would encourage the person who sees the end goal as the fulfillment of self, whether that be physically, spiritually, academically, occupationally. I see that as a false goal. And I do sincerely believe that ultimately you will be found wanting if you pursue that. If that is your end, to make yourself the best you can be for no other reason than to be the best or to feel the best, you're actually going to end up found wanting. Plenty of people realize this way too late in life, and it is nothing short of a tragedy when this is realized on death's door. Lives have been wasted over this philosophy, over this mentality, as surprising as it is, because even hearing myself say this, I can hear the critical ears of the modern millennial saying, "That's ridiculous. Why would it be unsuccessful to invest in myself? Why shouldn't I make myself the most physically strong, most attractive, sexually attractive, most financially lucrative, most appealing person to the world around me? Like, what could possibly be wrong with that?" The problem is that these are all fleeting things that that count for nothing once we reach the end of our lives. So I'm trying to advocate and promote and encourage people to look beyond the things that seem graspable in this life, because our bodies, our power, our bank balance, even our plans that we have for ourselves are not strong, are not lasting, and ultimately are not in our control. I see surrender to the greatest power of all, the one who actually breathed life into my lungs, your lungs, and breathed life into life itself. I talk about the world around us. He would be the one that I would recommend at least considering investigating, exploring, and hopefully you get to the point where you feel encouraged enough to surrender all you are to him, because it's the best decision that I've made, and I still haven't reaped anywhere near the full benefit of that decision. But every day I'm reminded by what a good decision it is, because I can let go of those things that hold me down, that the burdens that constantly weighing on me. Because when you invest in the worldview that is, I need more and I need to make myself more, then you're never satisfied and you're always looking for something to add, and it's just soul destroying ultimately.
Yes, because I think at the end of the day, like we are all after the same thing. We're all wanting to feel fulfillment, to feel joy, to be loved, to feel at
Yep.
peace. But there's just so much distraction and temptation in this world that misleads us and misguides us on our path to seeking those things. And I think, as you alluded to before, there's enough stories out there about people who did make it to the top, who were self-serving their whole lives and never felt that sense of fulfillment and peace. So what you're saying is absolute truth, and I think it's a personal journey in many ways. A lot of different spiritual models and ideologies are kind of being explored out there, but I really appreciate you telling us your perspective and your worldview, which again, I also share. For people though who are, still chasing success or chasing some sense of achievement in their lives, maybe, you can link it to where you are at currently. What is your end goal? What is the purpose or what you're striving for? Or is it, as you said before, not about striving, but surrendering? And what is then the goal in life?
Yes, that is a nuanced question, because striving in and of itself isn't a bad thing. I think it's actually a biblical concept to strive and to press on. It's the direction in which we're pressing on that's crucial. So yeah, absolutely work hard. But as Jesus said in the Bible, in the Gospel of Matthew, he says, if anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, in other words, lay down your life, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul? And so actually here, Jesus outlines an ultimate success, which is life. Not life as we know it here and now in the everyday, but life in its complete fullness, in such a way that we definitely don't fully comprehend now. But Jesus offers a success story that is beyond anything that we can see, touch, taste, smell, and an eternal life that is beyond measure, beyond limit, and beyond anything that we can actually experience now. We do get glimpses, of course, of the life that Jesus promises those who follow him. And you only have to look around, go stand outside and glory in creation, or experience the joy of a new birth or a new relationship, or the ecstasy of a piece of art that inspires, a great piece of music, or everyone knows what I mean. We have these moments of awe where we feel outside of ourselves, and I think these are reminders that God actually created this world and created us to be reflections of him. So we create ourselves. We are recreators, if you will. We use the tools that he has given us in creation to create, in order that we might experience the joy that he experienced in making it all, and also to point others to him by showing a reflection of his creativity. So it's a roundabout way of answering your question. The ultimate success is a life lived for Christ and with Christ that is ultimately only experienced in full after we leave this world, after our lives are over here. And that is a gift that is freely given to anyone who will recognize Jesus' identity as the King, and who freely takes up that offer to join him, as a citizen of the kingdom of God. So that's what I'm pointing towards ultimately. And you might say, well, what are you doing working in sports media? What's that got to do with it? But I see that as two things. I see the nobility of work. I see that specific job as given by God, and therefore there is something inherently noble about completing the task that he has given me. But second of all, I also see that as a vehicle for carrying out other more important work, or other important work in the world. And that is by making relationships with the people that I come across, be that colleagues, stakeholders, fans, listeners, consumers, in the way that I talk about the way that I engage with the world, and the way that I use my words to influence others. And maybe this podcast is an example of that. I don't know. Everyone has the opportunity to take it or leave it, and to dismiss my words as nonsense. But maybe there's someone out there who resonates with a little bit of what I'm saying, and thinks, you know what, this guy might be onto something. I'm gonna look into that at least. see what he's talking about and give it a go. But I can at least from a personal perspective guarantee you that it's the best decision that I've ever made, and I look forward to the success that awaits because of the present challenges or the present suffering.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I can feel that you're really living in your purpose, what God's purposed you just by having that awareness and that clarity. So, for people that feel a calling, particular vocation or a career, if a lack of courage or lack of confidence or conviction in that pathway is what they're battling with, what are some practical ideas, strategies can you impart? There's a lot of, just follow your heart, follow your dreams, all of those kind of things. I think I'd love to know from a practical point of view, what are some things people can do if they are clear about what their purpose is in life and clear about who they are, but are just wrestling with that fear and doubt?
I feel sympathy for the person who is in that situation if they are lacking encouragement, because that's all it is. And encouragement can take so many forms. I mean, even if you think about just the way that characters in the Bible are encouraged to go out and to do something, it could be through forgiveness or healing or deliverance. It could be through a challenge or a new perspective. It could be through affirmation, validation, or purpose. But it has to be something like that. That courage has to be received from an external place before it can be enacted. I truly believe this, and so if there are listeners or viewers out there who are feeling as if they know what their calling is or they know what they should be doing, but are just fearful to take that first step, I would say take a moment to look at what brought about that calling. Why do you feel convicted to do that? What is it about you? Have you been given a gift? Have you been given an extraordinary gift that not everyone is given? Or have you been given a platform? Do you have a platform that not everyone has? Or an opportunity that not everyone has? Or is there someone in your path, someone in your life that you feel that you need to speak to? Because all of these are potential sources for encouragement with the right perspective. Once you find that spark of encouragement, take it and just be fueled by it. Because I'm telling you, it's, as I said before, this is it's self-perpetuating. And once you get going, you'll find that if you are encouraged to take the first step, the second one's going to be even easier, and you'll be encouraged by the third, and soon you'll be up to the fourth and fifth, and it'll just start rolling for you. Now, I'm not saying that there won't be setbacks along the way. You might be pushed onto a different path, or you might be pushed back a couple of steps. But if you had the encouragement to start with, if you've got, as I said, the different ways of the different forms that encouragement can take, that's enough. That is enough for you. And especially if you are compelled or convicted that you have a message to say or a story to share, I think you've got all the tools at your disposal. So take heart, which is another translation of be encouraged. Biblically, when Jesus says to the paralyzed man, "Take heart, son," he is literally saying, "Be encouraged, your sins are forgiven." Or when Jesus says to the bleeding woman who is a social outcast and completely ostracized from Jewish society, he says, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has healed you." And these just are two examples. There are heaps more throughout the Bible where characters are encouraged. The Apostle Paul, Mary, the mother of Jesus, in the Old Testament, Moses, Job, Noah, they are all encouraged by something beyond themselves, something external to themselves, in order to undertake a calling that is actually really difficult a lot of the time, or dangerous, or fearful. And so I wouldn't say to someone, eradicate all fear, or eradicate all danger, or eradicate all doubt. I think embrace those things. They are part of what it means to have courage. as long as you are earnestly and sincerely seeking something that is beyond yourself, that is not just for the building up of your own reputation, power, wealth, then I encourage you to keep pursuing it, and you will be rewarded.
It's such an interesting viewpoint that you have about courage being external and not like self-generating.
Yep.
And if that's the case, then that you need encouragement in order to build courage towards, accomplishing what you're set out to do. It's possible to seek encouragement as well, looking for community. If you don't inherently have it, not everyone is fortunate to have a supportive network, but perhaps reaching out and finding where you can receive the encouragement. And as you mentioned as well, the Bible is full of stories, hopeful stories, encouraging stories about the power of God and working in our lives.
I'd probably venture so far as to say that we're not aiming for fearlessness. That I
Yes.
think fear is an inevitable emotional reaction of being human. We all have it. And it's not necessarily antithetical to courage. Courage is showing up in the face of fear and
Yes,
adversity. And
absolutely.
I mean, like, since you asked me to do this podcast a week or so ago, I've been unintentionally on the lookout, right, just for this theme popping up. So it's been on my mind, and so I'll read a book or watch a movie, and there it is. And so, like, I watched the movie Eddie the Eagle about the Olympian at the 1988 Winter
Yes.
Olympics. Michael Edwards is this. I mean, it's not necessarily even the only or best version of best example of courage. But here's a guy who is somehow develops this compulsion to want to be an Olympian from a very young age. Now, he battles through all sorts of medical problems with bad knees and so forth, and everyone's telling him, "You're not going to be an Olympian. Just give it up. Like, try plastering, because like that's a good safe career." But he's just convinced that he's going to be an Olympian, and so the whole movie is about his quest, and it's not overstating it. His quest to become an Olympian, and not only does he show courage in order to get to this unbelievable climax of the film, no spoilers, but we also see courage playing out in the lives of the support cast, including a very jaded and cynical former ski jumper by the name of Bronson Piet. True story, by the way, who goes from the transformation he has from the start of the film to the end is astronomical because of the encouragement he receives from Eddie the Eagle, from Michael Edwards. And then Bronson's old coach, who's extremely jaded himself because his star pupil Bronson in the 1960s or 70s had all the talent but none of the work ethic. He is also encouraged to enact this moment, and again, I won't give it away, but there's a moment of courage from the coach of the coach, Warren Sharp, where I think sort of this whole concept of courage is brought to a head because we see three layers of courage playing out on the screen in three different generations, all because they're encouraged by someone else or something else. And it's just it's a great example or a great picture of how courage works and the different ways it can play out. And it's not always in, achieving Olympic success. In fact, even Eddie the Eagle doesn't achieve Olympic success. But each of those three characters that I've mentioned end up in a better place in their lives and a better place in their identities because they've been encouraged to do something that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do by themselves. So
Yes.
yeah, for our listeners, go and check out Eddie the Eagle.
Eddie
It's
Eagle.
a
Starring
ripping
Hugh
story.
Jackman and Taron Egerton. I'm all
Yeah.
over it because it's on my watch list and I have to watch it this weekend. So thanks for that
And
recommendation.
Christopher Walken, by the
Oh,
way, to
that's
complete
right.
that tree.
He plays the other coach, or
Yeah, he
is
plays
he just
Warren Sharp,
there?
the
You
third
go.
one I spoke
Okay,
about. So yeah,
that's a pretty good cast.
unbelievable story.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, as you said, it's been on your mind, and this is what's drawn me to this this idea that with this virtue, because courage is a tenet of Christianity as well. But it's just there's so many layers to it, and for me, I'm discovering that it is something that is available to us. and you've taught me that, perhaps it's something that is external to us, but that we can seek it, and it can assist us if we're open to receiving encouragement or also giving it back. Do you have other aspirations to take your career in a certain direction, or are there other callings that you have yet to fulfill in some way?
I'm sure there are. I have a strong inkling that there are. When you first contacted me about this courage podcast, I thought, well, I'm a terrible example of courage because I'm not a dreamer, schemer, or even long-term planner. I'm organized, but I'm not a planner. And I've always adopted the mentality of I will go where the opportunities come. And it served me well so far. Now I've only been in the industry 16 years, but it's worked really well. I happen to be married to a woman, Elmi, who is quite the opposite and spends most of her downtime and probably subconscious time dreaming about what the shape of her life might look like, what the shape of our lives might look like. And so over the past 2 years, I've been thrust into a new way of thinking that involves actually looking at that blank canvas and looking at the possibilities that we could start to draw on that blank canvas, which terrifies me. I hate blank canvases. I've always been a dot to dot man. But suddenly I see now that other people are wired differently, and for good reason, because God has put desires in her heart and has put different callings on her mind, which may involve me. So I am reluctantly more and more open to the idea that sports media, podcasting, producing, presenting may not be all there is for me in this life. I do believe that God has gifted me with communication and sort of creative messaging type skills that I might share with others. Like I do feel strongly that that is what I'm good at doing, using words and images to send messages. But you can apply that principle in myriad ways, and so I am open to new opportunities. I should put the new filter up on my LinkedIn profile, open to work. But yeah, currently happy doing what I'm doing, but no doubt there will be there are changes on the horizon for me, and I'm not sure how far the horizon is. But I look forward to seeing what God's got in store. And even if I face that with trepidation and fear, I know that the greatest example of courage is Jesus himself, whom I'd be remiss to leave off the list of great case studies of courage, along with Eddie the Eagle and Bronson Peart and so forth, because actually his example of courage there in the garden before his arrest and literally carrying his cross, his means of execution, to Golgotha, to Calvary, to the place where he'd be crucified, the most torturous form of execution that the world has ever known. But facing that with purpose, conviction, and with a belief that is beyond his own physical safety, his own status, even his own control in the end, when he decided to surrender all he was and all he had to his Father, in heaven, was the ultimate display of courage. And so, as Christians, as followers of Christ, we press on with that same mentality, denying ourselves and taking up our own crosses, hopefully not the crosses of execution, but the crosses of surrendering all that we are and all that we have, and all that we could be, for the cause of a full life lived for Christ and lived with an eye on and preferring others' needs, that God might be glorified for the great creator, for the great being, the supreme authority that he is.
Amen. A life of faith and of service and surrender. That's, something that everyone can take away, is just trying to relinquish control. Not feeling like everything has to have an answer. I think there's a lot of courage just in that simple fact that,
That's right.
we wouldn't have to dictate every minute of our lives, or like make plans. And I think hustle culture, in the business world, and even career in the professional industries, it's very much about, as you said, accruing things, making money, adding to your CV, and all of that. Living a life of surrender, knowing that something greater than you, I think, is an
Yeah.
important
And
message.
someone who, it's not just someone greater than you, like could be a, malevolent being, but knowing someone who is greater than you, who actually cares because he brought you into this world and breathed life into you. He designed
Yes,
you, designed you the way that he wanted to design you.
out of
So
love.
we can take heart from the fact that we actually are surrendering ourselves to a benevolent, an all-loving, all-powerful God, not just any old one that might take advantage of us for their own benefit. And so that's the greatest comfort and the greatest encouragement, I believe, of all.
Oh, beautiful. Now, I was going to ask you to define courage as we wrap up our conversation, but I think, you have given us so much insight and a lot of wisdom around the virtue of courage. But I will ask what other virtue trait, habit, skill, mindset you believe pairs well with courage. Like to think of courage as the sort of main course or
Yeah,
the
sure,
plate. So, what other kind of side dish, beverage would you tack
sure.
onto to that?
It pairs very well with trust, patience, and humility. And they're all, yeah, they go so well together, don't they? It's like a perfect harmony on a plate. When you are courageous, you are not trusting your own ability. You are trusting the process and the plan, and that comes from somewhere else. Um, Patience is a necessary virtue because oftentimes when we take on something that requires courage, the results are not immediate. In some cases, it is a lifetime. And so patience is absolutely necessary in order to see it through. And humility, as I mentioned earlier, um, is the result of stripping ourselves of the things that the world tells us to accumulate, the physical, the power, prestige, privilege, and so forth. And so humility is not pathetic. Humility is not kind of rendering ourselves impotent in the world. Humility is simply a lower view of self, and recognizing the needs of others and attending to those needs, because we realize that we are not the center of the universe. So yeah, I would say trust, patience, and humility are the accompanying dishes to the wonderful main of courage.
I love it.
Bon appetit.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, John. Well, I just want to just take the next minute or so to express my gratitude to you. Obviously, for taking the time to have this very fruitful conversation with me, to let me pick your brain and to, hear your insights and your stories, for being open with your journey as a creative, as, a child of God, as a man with great purpose in this world. I want to say thank you for being an example of courage for me. And I know you might not see it in yourself, but, one of the reasons I approached you was because, thinking about potential guests for the show, I cast my mind back to my uni days, and you did come across as someone who just had a quiet confidence about him. Like, I remember, studying with you and seeing you in our little lecture halls and classrooms, and you did come across as someone that I felt knew who he was. And I think at that time, you know, I still deal with my own self-doubt and insecurities, but, there was something about you that made me feel like, oh, this guy knows who he is and what he wants to do, because you were already on that path of broadcasting and presenting. And those are the kind of things I sort of learned just through, our group chats and things. Something we didn't really cover today, but you're also a
Mm.
musician and you're a
Oh yes.
singer. And, so learning those little things, I just thought, well, I found it was relatable because I'm also a multi-passionate creative person, but you just carried yourself quite sure about all of those things. You weren't afraid to express your passion. So I want to thank you for that, because that's obviously made you top of mind when putting this show together. So thank you for being an example of courage, and also now being someone who is so openly sharing his faith and encouraging and enlightening people with the wisdom you've accrued over your years. I really appreciate it. And I know that, this is an episode for me that I'm going to listen back to as well. And I'm sure other listeners will find value. So thank you for that, Jon.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you for the encouragement and the opportunity to be an encouragement. And yeah, I must say, I was daunted by the prospect of being on the podcast when you asked me. So it was an act of courage just to sort of take it on. But now that I've done it, I actually feel encouraged to keep going and to pursue other opportunities like it. So, like I say, hopefully it pays it forward in many ways.
Amazing. Well, is there any last thing that you'd like to say to our listeners?
Give Jesus a go, and maybe he'll change your life.
Jon Hoevenaars, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.